This video will help you work through Part 2, Revolution, as part of our Africans in America unit. There are 3 different articles that we're going to look at in Part 2: Slavery and Religion, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution and the New Nation. So I'm going to start with Slavery and Religion. I left off, this is Part 1. I read through all of this, and once I was finished, I scrolled back up to the top so that I can access the other parts. I wanted to show you that in case you're trying to figure out how to navigate the website. So I'm going to click on Part 2 up at the top. And like I said in the video for Part 1, at the beginning of each part, you'll see an introduction. So I'm going to read the introduction, and then I will go to the article that I need. The story of the American Revolution, as traditionally recounted, is the saga of the 13 colonies fighting their colonial ruler, Britain, for independence. But an equally compelling part of the story is the personal, religious, and legal challenges of African Americans of this period and their allies to slavery. The spirit of liberty and the disruptions of the Revolutionary era encouraged African American men and women to choose sides, both patriot and loyalist, and fight to define what this nation would become. All right, the first one I need is called Slavery and Religion. So I'm going to come down here to the list of links and click on that one. I'm going to read this, and I'm looking for the answer to number 9. Why was conversion to Christianity attractive to many slaves? All right, I'm going to read this quote from a historian. This was not a distant, faraway God in some kind of institutional church, but it was a God, said the evangelicals, involved in the daily lives of people, involved in every thought and every deed of your life. There had never been anything like it. Here's a meeting of 3,000 people out in a field, blacks and whites together, listening to a preacher who says, "Here in my message is a new life for you. Here's a new chance for you. Here's a God who had your interest at heart. Here's a God who may deliver you." The religious revivals known as the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening swept through both the North and South periodically from the 1740s through the 1780s. As a result of the revival movements, many Americans abandoned the hierarchical religion of their ancestors for a more egalitarian God who offered more immediate salvation. This ethos helped prepare people for the egalitarianism of the American Revolution. The revivalists generally did not challenge slavery, but they preached to everyone, regardless of race. The Methodists and the Baptists, in particular, welcomed converts from the black and white working population. Fearing the Christian message of spiritual equality, slave owners initially resisted evangelicals preaching to their bond people, but as the revival movement spread, a few even came to consider it their Christian duty to teach their slaves about the Bible. African Americans played a major role in their own conversion and for their own reasons. Africans brought to America initially resisted giving up the religions of their forefathers, but over the years and with the birth of new generations on American soil, accepting Christianity became part of accepting America as home. Over time, large numbers of slaves found the biblical message of spiritual equality before God appealing and found comfort in the biblical theme of deliverance. And that is your answer for number 9. So if you need to press pause to write or type that answer, you could do that now. The first generation of African American leaders, ministers, arose from the revival movement. George Leal and his protégés, Andrew Bryan and David George, built the first black Baptist churches in Georgia and South Carolina during the height of the Revolution. The Black Baptist movement thrived in British-occupied Savannah and Charleston. After the war, the geographical reach of their combined ministries was remarkable. By 1790, George Leal had emigrated to Jamaica with the Loyalists, and he preached regularly to 350 converts. David George established 7 churches in Nova Scotia before leaving for Sierra Leone, West Africa, where he founded another Baptist church. By 1800, Andrew Bryan's First Baptist Church of Savannah had grown to a congregation of 700. Lemuel Haynes was an unusual black minister for his times because in his 50-year career, he preached to predominantly white congregations in Connecticut, Vermont, and upstate New York. Although these early leaders were black men, women were the majority of the membership of early black congregations, and they frequently took the lead in conversion. Many of these women claimed and actually exercised the right to preach, and a large number of them were exhorters, informal preachers. And now I am going to go to the Declaration of Independence. It says in your document there, open the link to the original document. So I'm going to do that. I just have to find it here. Rough draft of the Declaration of Independence. Click here for the text because I can't read that. Okay, so this is the actual Declaration of Independence, just in a text that we can actually read and not the cursive writing. Number 10 says, how was slavery a contradiction to the ideals written in the Declaration of Independence? So I'm going to read this and I want you to think about that question and think of how you would answer that. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for a people to advance from that subordination in which they have hitherto remained, and to assume among the powers of the earth the equal and independent station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the change. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and independent, that from that equal creation they derive in rights inherent and inalienables, among which are the preservation of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government shall become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, begun at a distinguished period and pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them to arbitrary power, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. I think that's all you need in order to answer number 10. So you're looking for hypocrisy or contradiction. You can press pause if you need more time. I'm going to go to the Constitution and the New Nation. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the narrative. And it should be down at the bottom here. Constitution and the New Nation. And the question I need to answer here is number 11. How did the Constitution deal with slavery? After the American Revolution, the movement to abolish slavery gained momentum in the North. In the South, though, where the black majority lived, slave owners reasserted their rights. At the Constitutional Convention of 1787, Southerners forced several compromises that laid the foundation for a new nation, a nation which espoused liberty but practiced bondage. Although the word slavery does not appear in the Constitution, Georgia and South Carolina delegates insisted that a proportion of their slave population be factored in to determine representation in Congress. I don't know if you guys remember, but that's called the 3/5 Compromise. The Fugitive Slave Clause affirmed the rights of slaveholders to reclaim runaways, and Southerners won a constitutional guarantee that the slave trade, which had resumed after the war, could continue unabated for the next 20 years. I think I'm going to stop there because that really gives you what you need to answer number 11, how the Constitution dealt with slavery. If you want to read the rest, you can. But I'm going to stop the video now. That was part 2. And if you need help with part 3, that'll be a separate video.